That was the whole joke of why he joined the NWO, because Scott Steiner and Rick Steiner are WCW made superstars, okay? One of the greatest tag teams ever. And that was the biggest thing ever when Scott turned on Rick to join the NWO, and the whole thing was he became Big Papa Pump to become like a movie star character. That was the whole thing, is Hogan is promising everyone movies and everything in Hollywood just so he joins the NWO just to protect him, in the scam. That's the brilliant storyline. So what it is that Buff Bagwell, he joined the NWO, and he went from Marcus Bagwell in the American Males, where he was a George Michael type character, like a pretty boy pop star. That's why he looks like George Michael. But he became Buff Bagwell, which is hilarious. I get it, like buff, like muscles. And he's like, I'm buff, and I'm the stuff. And the ladies just can't get enough. He showed he could be a good guy when he pretended to be on Rick Steiner's side, and he screwed over, and him and Scott screwed him over in the NWO. Oh my God. Buff Bagwell showed that he is the future. Like, he's 2000. He's 2001 for Bischoff. If that whole thing didn't go down the toilet. Because Russo's never supposed to be there. So people are like, oh, I don't like WCW 2000. It's like, I got news for you. It's not WCW, because Eric Bischoff's WCW. That was Vince Russo, who was the writer of the WF just a couple months before. So you're actually hating your own thing. You're hating the guy who wrote all the stuff you like. You hate Vince Russo. He brought in all WF guys. Jeff Jarrett jumped all the guys like Bagwell and Benoit and everything, and just got put right into the main event when he wasn't even there for the 2 year. He was there in '97 in the Horsemen, but I mean, he was gone all that time, and it was supposed to be Eddie Guerrero, Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, their time, and that's why they jumped. They didn't jump because of Bischoff. They didn't jump because hating WCW in a whole. They thought WCW was going to be around forever. They just left at that time because it's like, well, this is bullshit. Russo brought in all his guys. He brought in garbage. He brought in the guys that WF only used because at the time in '96 and '97 they were just building up from bankruptcy and almost out of business. They were getting killed in the ratings, like Ahmed Johnson and PG-13, DOA, the Harris brothers. They were brought in to be the powers to be's bodyguards, creative control, which was the only good idea they did with them in WCW. But they were all WF guys, so they buried the WCW talent that were already made superstars. Russo did, to bring in all these WF guys, and it's like, that's a mistake, and that's why Benoit won the title, and then after he won the title, he left to WWE. And it's sad, because Bischoff said that he saw them leave, and it just destroyed his soul and his heart, because they were his future WCW. So that's all a wrong idea. And it's the truth. And so they're not very clear in their books and everything, and when they bury WCW on the DVDs, they don't specify, like, it wasn't Bischoff, like they would in podcasts today or in their books. Like, because when I read Eddie Guerrero's book, like I pointed out the other day, is that he doesn't hate Bischoff. He is mad because of Russo, but he doesn't specify that. So the thing is that, but he does have the wrong idea about Bischoff, because he says on how, Bischoff didn't market me and all this stuff. It's like, yes, he did. But the people who ran everything of Time Warner didn't allow Eric Bischoff to sell, his lie, cheat, and steal shirt. They didn't let him. That's not his fault. He actually wanted to. And Jericho lies, like I said in the other episode, that, he said, like, Eric Bischoff didn't market me and sell my shirts. Like, yeah, they did. They did sell your shirt, right, to buy, right, you got your own commercial. You were huge. You were Eric Bischoff's next Shawn Michaels. He wanted him to be the biggest guy and join the NWO and everything, and Jericho just said, I won't do it. And Eric's nice and just lets them do what they want, when Vince McMahon would be like, no, screw you, you're doing what I say. That's what I think is funny, is that Jericho and all them learned pretty hard that when you go to WWE, it's not WWE in 2000 and 99 where Vince is letting you, like, have creative control. Like, when Mick Foley came in, Vince McMahon didn't even want him, and that's why he was in WCW in the first place, because he never wanted him, because he hates hardcore wrestling, and he hates anything edgy. So the only reason why Mick Foley even got to become Mankind is that's all Mick Foley's ideas. You think Vince is this creative genius, and he's an idiot. Eric Bischoff is the great writer. Paul Heyman's a good writer, even though he's a horrible person. And Vince Russo's a good writer. He just needs, like, someone to balance him. Vince McMahon, you could say whatever you want about Russo. Vince McMahon needs all them. Why do you think he hired Vince Russo and Ed Ferreira in the first place to compete with Bischoff? Because he can't come up with anything. Why do you think he was almost out of business in '96? because he can't come up with any ideas. Nobody likes his ideas. Okay? He gave them creative control to be themselves. And then he let Russo do whatever. He wanted Austin to be the ringmaster, a serious wrestler, and he wanted The Rock to be Rocky Maivia, a serious, happy babyface, not The Rock. They only became them because creative control of themselves doing it, and Vince Russo writing the ideas. So you have to like Russo, too. That's the truth. So now let me go back to 2000. So, what I was getting to my point. In 2000, okay, Dean Malenko, he was the world's cruiserweight champion a bunch of times. He was in the Horsemen. Eric Bischoff was pushing him to the moon, too. That's why they put him and Benoit and the Horsemen together. That was to be in that time where they're going to be elevated to the main event. See, the Revolution gimmick when it was, and then it was ripped off by the Radicals, ripped off by WWE when they jumped to WF in 2000, and they debuted together. That was a ripoff, but what it was is, like I said in the last episode, is that it was they were doing a storyline on TV. Here's where everybody has the wrong idea. They hear the wrestlers on TV saying, like, but it ain't real. It's not a shoot. It's fake. They're saying, like, we're being held down and everything. That was the storyline where they were saying that on the TV show because they were getting held down, and then they joined the Revolution, and then they were gonna become the main eventers and everything in the future. But what happened is when Russo came in, he derailed everything Bischoff had pre-planned for 6 months and his whole future, and that's what happened, and that's why they jumped. So Russo ruined that and ruined everything. And the network ruined everything. And the owners ruined everything. Not Eric Bischoff. Everybody should love Eric Bischoff. That's all I'm saying. It's everybody else that doesn't come up with anything, steals everything, is a bad person. He's the only one who may not be perfect, but he's a good person, and he came up with the Attitude Era, and he came up with everything. That's all I've been saying, is that he's the scapegoat for no reason. So what happened was that Dean Malenko and all them were fed up, and they were all friends, so they jumped. And they didn't. Perry Saturn doesn't hate WCW or anything. He just jumped for a better opportunity because he got screwed out of what was going to be. But then Vince McMahon did nothing with him and just threw him on Jacked and Sunday Night Heat, their C shows. Dean Malenko, Vince McMahon just ruined by making him like a rapist or like a woman predator going after Lita. He buried him on purpose because he was a huge, credible wrestler, the Iceman, like superstar for WCW, their guy, and he got buried by Vince. So don't let anybody tell you different, you know? So then, going back to 2001 now, Vince McMahon buried the WCW guys just like he buried the 80s territory guys and all the other companies, just that's what Vince likes to do because he's evil. Okay, he would rather ruin people instead of utilize them for their best abilities. That's why he made them all like, let's name all the garbage. You got the Goon, which is a hockey enforcer. You got Duke the Dumpster. You got Bastion Booger. You got Mantar. You got the biggest. Nobody wanted to watch any of that. So you think Vince McMahon is this genius? Get real and watch the whole thing in order. And I'm sorry if you're sentimental to it. Those are all just really bad ideas, okay? And that's just all silly stuff that nobody was... It's okay to like it, but no one was watching at the time. And don't try to say it was this brilliant TV, because that's unfair. That's just him conditioning everyone out of nostalgia and being, oh, I grew up watching WWE. He's the one who's racist. He would take anybody like Scott Hall, who was a WCW guy first, by the way, as the Diamond Stud. He took him and made him Razor Ramon and made him Cuban instead of just getting a real Cuban guy and just being a stereotype. Yokozuna was Samoan. He made him Japanese when you can clearly tell he's not. And everyone's a stereotype of what they are. So Vince McMahon is actually the racist one, not WCW. WCW let them be themselves, like I said in that one video. Like Ray tries to say bad things about Eric Bischoff. That's not fair. He made you just Rey Mysterio the guy. Not a luchador, not a stereotype, not a Mexican. Ray the man. And made you a superstar without the mask. And that was his intentions. Vince McMahon is the one who made you a token of the one Mexican luchador. Vince McMahon is the one who's racist, and everybody knows it, and you can look up articles on it all day. But it's just buried for some reason. Or maybe it's out more so now, because of podcasts and stuff, where maybe I'm a little outdated because I was ahead of the time where I wanted to do all this like 12, 15 years ago. These videos, but I just didn't at the time because I was going through my own issues, which, you know, being trans and not wanting to be on camera and everything at the time and going through stuff. So let me go to 2001 now, where Kevin Nash knew it's like, nah, I'm probably going to be buried. And Goldberg doesn't love wrestling to begin with, and he was a horrible person back then in real life. And it's just like Brock Lesnar is. Brock Lesnar literally walked out on them and held them ransom, just like Ultimate Warrior did. Brock Lesnar's a horrible person, and he's a complete ripoff of Sid Vicious. Even later Sid Vicious, when Sid Vicious starts wearing like the flannel and the jeans and being like about a country, like more from the country and all that, that's Lesnar. Like now, it's a complete ripoff. It's the same thing. Done over again. Everything WWE after 01, you don't have to watch WWE after 2000, which is like going to blow everyone's mind. They're going to be like, how dare you say that? It's true. Everything after 2000, well, everything in 2000 is a ripoff from WCW too, but at least it's done well. But everything after 2000, because I'm not counting 2001, because 2001 was that whole invasion of ECW and WCW storyline, which was just an excuse to bury the two of them. And it doesn't count as any actual writing. So, you know, and everything on, you don't need to see. It's all been done before. All the ideas are redone. They may be disguised with a different guy, but it's all redone ideas to a T. Like I was saying about how Lenny and Lodi's, Billy and Chuck, yada yada yada. You get my point. It's all ripoffs of WCW 2000 redone in 2005. You have the FBI, where Vince McMahon disguises it, where it's like, oh, that's not ripping off WCW. FBI's from ECW, right? With Little Guido, who is Nunzia, but it's actually done in the style of the Mamalukes, which was WCW with Johnny the Bull Stamboli and Big Vito and Disco Inferno. It's the exact same thing redone in 2005 from 2000. They just disguise it with the... Vince McMahon disguises things. Well, when he steals the ideas, exact. So, I keep getting distracted. I'm sorry. In 2001, Vince McMahon he buried DDP by making him this, like, rapist, going after Undertaker's wife and everything, just to bury him because he was like, a huge star. He tried to bury Booker T, but it didn't work by making him that, like, crackhead crazy guy in 2002 when he was feuding with Austin. Like, you know, where he was, like, all, like, nuts, like, and they made, because he was a serious, like, glue good guy, like, for the people in WCW. And then all of a sudden now he's this wild, bad guy, heel, crazy guy, like he's on crack in 2002. Vince did that to bury him, but what happened is it got over. And people liked it. And then when he put him with Goldust, he just got even more over. Even though Triple H would bury everybody from WCW then. Like, everyone's like, oh, WCW didn't make stars. It's like, they made everybody, and Bischoff was building them all up. And then when you even watch Russo as he is, making stars and everything, because you have 3 Count and everything, which is the boy band with Shane Helms, they're built in Evan Courageous and all that, and Shannon Moore, so they're making stars like crazy. And Vince, but they're like, oh, but they're not world heavyweight, they're not world champion. It's like, well, WWE didn't make anyone world champion either. It was okay if you watch 2001. It's all Triple H. Or no, Triple H was out for 01, but if you watch 02 when he comes back, it's all Triple H. 03 is all Triple H. 04 is all Triple H. 05 is all Triple H. Oh, it's all Triple H. Forever. What he does is he buries every WCW guy. Let's go back. Let's see, 2002, Triple H is the main event. 2003 against Jericho, who's a WCW guy in the scheme of things, and he doesn't let Jericho get the world title because Triple H back then didn't want to push anyone. Even if he's different now, Triple H was a horrible monster back then, where he screwed over Chyna in real life and got her fired by cheating on her with Stephanie just to become the son-in-law so he could run the company today, which he's doing. It's true. And everybody will tell you that works there. And they worked there then. You know what's funny? His own buddies like Road Dogg and them said it all in real interviews. And now they're all buddy again. But they were mad at him in 2000 and hated him because he got Road Dogg fired over marijuana in the beginning of 2001 while Road Dogg was gone. And then he went to TNA. Ooh, his good friend. But other guys could go do it. WWE is more politics than any company ever, actually. Or it's whoever is liked. Like in the 90s, if Shawn Michaels didn't like you, you were fired or you were buried. And he had Vince McMahon by the balls. Then in the 2000s, it's Triple H. Triple H buried everyone. He He buried Jericho in '02. He buried Booker T at WrestleMania in '03. He buried Kevin Nash in '03. He buried Goldberg. He made sure he always had to have the world title in Evolution. He made sure he had the world title all the time with the it was all him. Cuz Rock left to do movies. So Austin couldn't wrestle anymore, even though they were shoving him in '03 because they couldn't make any stars. And like I said in that last episode where Vince McMahon was the main event of everything and the top heel on SmackDown, because they couldn't make any new stars. They really couldn't. The ratings were lower than... They're the same as WCW in 2000, and they're all doing the same ideas from 2000, so they're like, oh, don't watch WCW in 2000. You can't do any better. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm not saying WCW 2000 was brilliant or anything or great. I'm just saying that at least it was original, and you're just redoing their ideas, and you can't even make any new stars. The only reason why Randy Orton is liked is because he got to like so long where people grew up on him. It's like Sid Vicious and Ultimate Warrior. They have no talent. Like, no offense to them. Like, they're not like that great with charisma or any ability. Like, they're not the best, but people just grew up for them for like years and years, and they just get used to seeing them. And it's just nostalgic or sentimental. Because you want to know the truth on WWE? Okay, let's go to 2001. Vince McMahon in 2001, instead of using all the great talent that WCW made, like, you know, AJ Styles was there. He was Air Paris. He was in WCW. Kid Cash. All the X Division guys. Eric Young. All them guys were from the power plant of WCW's development. They're all WCW. Lash LaRue. These are all brilliant talent that were so talented, and Vince McMahon purposely didn't use any of them except for Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare. He used 2 out of everything and buried them all and brought in all his guys because OVW is Jim Cornette's company. After Smoke, okay, if you don't, I'm assuming, I'm just going to talk as if everybody doesn't know this to the main public. There's a company called Ohio Valley Wrestling, and it was OVW. And it was on local TV around the north or whatever. And it was this indie company like ECW. It was like this small, territory-based local company. Okay? And Jim Cornette owned it. And it was his company after he had a company called Smoky Mountain Wrestling, but he left it. He was trying to do that after WCW before he jumped on WF, and he left WCW in the early 90s before he worked with Vince McMahon throughout the whole Attitude Era. So, and before. And so, Ohio Valley Wrestling was his, but then it became, he let it become a developmental, it was still its own company, but it became a territory, or a development place, like for rookies, like a development camp place for the future stars. Like Nexus, before NXT, it was Ohio Valley. And it was in ECW was. And don't let anybody fool you that Paul Heyman lied to all his wrestlers, not paying them so he could embezzle and pocket the money, while Vince McMahon was actually paying and keeping the company alive. And he lied to everybody, saying that he's trying like better than Vince McMahon and hating him and trying to take out the corporate man and trying to take down Vince McMahon the whole time Vince has him in his pocket and he's paying him while he's taking all the money. And all the ECW wrestlers should have sued him. And Tommy Dreamer wanted to kill him in real life when he found that out. And that's a shoot. That's real. So Paul Heyman's the biggest piece of crap in real life. Vince Russo is and Vince McMahon are. Eric Bischoff is the least horrible guy in the wrestling industry. But yet they brainwashed everyone to make him the most hated. That's what this is all about. And Jim Cornette's not a bad guy at all. He just goes too hard on Bischoff and Russo when he should hate Vince McMahon, because Vince McMahon is the one who made a mockery of pro wrestling and making it into a circus and not even calling it wrestling. They're superstars. It's the universe. Because he doesn't want it to be wrestling. He's ashamed of it being wrestling, but people keep saying he's the top wrestling guy when he just stole everything. It's really sick. Like the irony of the truth when you really know the truth. So anyway, I'm distracted again because I'm really passionate about this and the truth. Is that Jim Cornette was making his own stars. He had John Cena, he had Randy Orton, he had Batista, he had the Basham brothers, he had Rico. All those guys that came up in '02 for WWE that are now 20 years old and nostalgic for all the kids younger, and it's like, oh my god, I'm old. Because those were all, like, when I was 12 years old in '02 and stuff, I was like, this is crap. Wrestling's just not how it used to be. Then I was saying it. And now these guys are old, sentimental to people younger than me. It's like, they were never supposed to happen. It was all a mistake. No offense, but it was all a mistake because Vince McMahon buried all the WCW guys and let them go to TNA. And then, you know what's funny? When Triple H took over the company now, He wants them all now, like AJ Styles and all them, but Vince didn't want them because they were like, oh, too small, and I don't want them because they're WCW guys. So TNA got to become WCW Continued in '02, and got all those guys. Your Eric Young, your Chris Sabin, your Alex Shelley, your Kid Cash, your AJ Styles, your Samoa Joes, all them were all TNA, and they're the greatest athletic. They made the X Division, which was the Cruiserweight division times 1,000 on crack, and made WWE look 20 years behind again. But the problem is that Vince was a genius in getting everyone to not watch TNA by conditioning them to think like, oh, I could only watch WWE. TNA is evil. TNA is evil. Even though it was like okay, I'm sorry. It was the greatest thing ever after WCW. If you watch, you have to watch. I'm sorry. If you're a wrestling fan and you like good show, good wrestling, and you like the Attitude Era, and you like the 90s, watch TNA '02 all the way to 11. It is the most brilliant stuff. They did Joker, and AEW is reaping the benefits of what TNA built. And it's not fair, because TNA couldn't get on TBS and TNT like WCW was, because of who owned it at the time. And so now you have all that wrestling, and they're doing what they want, but Eric Bischoff couldn't do it. So they canceled WCW just for them to be new owners and have wrestling on there now. That's disgusting. WCW got screwed just for AEW to be there when it could have just been WCW right now. Because they just cut it, because they didn't want wrestling on their channel. It was Jamie Kellner. Jamie Kellner was with AOL and with the merger in '01, and they didn't want wrestling on their channel. The end. That's your truth. So anyway, Vince McMahon, Jim Cornette was making these guys all stars. He had a running episodic storyline TV show with OVW. That was pretty good. And that was Charlie Haas too. All those guys. Shelton Benjamin, they're all from OVW. Even though Shelton Benjamin, they tried to push in like '04 and stuff, and '05, like this great athletic guy. It's like, have you watched The Amazing Red? If you never heard of The Amazing Red, Google him. All the guys from TNA, AJ Styles, Amazing Red, they make anybody WWE had look like 1950 in comparison. That's why you got to watch TNA then. The Amazing Red was the greatest thing ever in '02 and '03, athletically. Him and AJ Styles. He was better than AJ Styles. He just didn't have the star power, like the charisma and everything, to get over as a main eventer type guy at the time. But he was more athletic than anybody in the ring, talent-wise. Like for today's style of wrestling, where it's all flips and everything, like the Young Bucks, that's the X Division in '02. They were way ahead of their time. And Triple H knew all that. Triple H wanted to bring all those guys in back years ago, but Vince McMahon is outdated like he always is, and why he was getting his ass kicked in the 90s, and why he was getting his ass, and why he should have been getting his ass kicked in the future. But what happened is that say WCW still had its name recognition, because people go by name recognition like, oh, McDonald's. Say instead of TNA, because TNA had all WW's guys anyway, say it was WCW's name doing all that on Spike. Well, then the ratings would have been huge, and people would have been loving it, and AJ. But because it was TNA, Vince McMahon was like, oh, that's a nobody company. And people are like, oh, and Vince McMahon convinced everyone, like, that's a developmental, that's not real. So then when they take them all in like 2013 and they steal all the TNA guys, like Bobby Roode, all them are superstars, Samoa Joe, that TNA built on national TV, superstars. That's not no indie company or development. They made them sound like, oh, these are nobodies. Now they're in the big time. That's why you should hate Vince McMahon if you're a wrestling fan. He buries any other company like he's the only one who's legit. That's insulting and hurtful. And nobody else does that. And so that's not fair. And that's what he did with all them. And Triple H wanted them all in the first place, where they would have never even been there. Even then, it was outdated. That was only because Triple H took over. Because Triple H knows like what's good talent, but he steals everything, just like he stole Kevin Nash's NWO gimmick in '96, in '98 when he was in '98, '97 and '98. He rode the coattails of Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels them in the '90s and that's why he got punished, because they weren't going to punish Shawn Michaels because he had Vince McMahon by the balls in '96, and when Scott Hall and Kevin Nash jumped to WCW. So Triple H got punished, and then he ended up riding the coattails of Shawn and with playing the politics backstage. And then he marries Stephanie, and he screws over Chyna in real life without even telling her, and cheated. He legitimately cheated on her, and it was uncomfortable there, and he got her fired in 2001 and ruined her life. Where that's a whole thing. You can look up all that, where they're like, he's a horrible person. You have all these people now saying, I love Triple H because you grew up on him. He's a horrible monster, and he's a wannabe of the NWO 96 anyway. He never did anything original. I'm sorry to tell you, but like the only reason why Randy Orton's and Batista's and everything came up is because Vince McMahon didn't want to use all the guys that you ended up getting years later, like AJ Styles, that he could have had if he was smart in 2001. That's what's so funny.